Hello students, today we are going to learn in detail about the diseases of salivary glands. So this is part 1. So in part 1 diseases of salivary glands, we will be learning about the histology of salivary glands first. Okay, so first we will be dealing about the histology part, histology of salivary glands. So this comes under oral histology section. Okay, part 1. So the reference texts are two. One is Tenkeith's textbook of oral histology and second one Schaeffer's textbook of oral pathology, 8th edition. Okay. So before starting with that of histology part, let's learn in detail about the composition of saliva. So because composition of saliva is a favorite question of examiners for MCQ. So remember important points pertaining to saliva. The normal pH of saliva is around 6.7 to 7.4, which means it is slightly acidic. Okay, 6.7 to 7.4 is the pH range of saliva. It's very important MCQ question. Now in saliva, if you take the composition part, it contains around 99.5% of water. Okay, saliva consists of around 99.5% of water and only 0.5% constitute the solid part. Under the water, we can again divide them into organic and inorganic substances. So organic substances include enzymes and other organic substances are also listed there. Inorganic substances include sodium, calcium, potassium, bicarbonates, bromide, chlorine, fluoride, phosphate and other substances like oxygen, carbon dioxide and nitrogen. Whereas enzymes include amylase, maltase, lingual lipase, okay, lysozyme, carbonic anhydrase, kallikrein, etc. Okay, so the composition part is very important. Now remember, because now we'll be coming slide, we'll be learning in detail about this composition. Okay, now and the saliva, since it is slightly acidic, the buffering activity of saliva is mainly given by bicarbonates. Okay, so remember that point, the saliva buffering action is mainly done by bicarbonates. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Saliva main composition, water is around 99.5% and solids is around 0.5%. Remember that point, that percentage is very important and pH is also important, 6.7 to 7.4%. Coming on to MCQ viewpoint, in the case of composition of saliva, the functions of saliva is again divided into three parts. Okay, the functions of saliva, the centermost circle, you just remember. Again, it is divided into the functions towards food. Okay, when you have a food, what is the functions of saliva? If you have a carbohydrate content food, if you have a protein content food, how does it helps in digestion, how it helps in taste of the food, and how does it help in bolus formation. Okay, and if you take the teeth, exclusively for the teeth, what are the functions of saliva? How does it give a buffering capacity? Okay, buffering is given mainly by bicarbonates, remember that point. How does it protect against demineralization? How it helps in remineralization? Okay, then lubrication. And when you come into microorganisms, how does it fight against antibacterial, how it acts as an antibacterial, antifungal and antiviral. Okay, so remember whatever I have given in red stars, okay, so those are important for MCQs. Okay, whatever I have given in red stars is very compulsory, it should by heart. Okay, so buffering capacity, as I told you, it is mainly by bicarbonates. Okay, because the pH of saliva is slightly acidic. Now coming on to next one, antiviral property of saliva, mainly which immunoglobulin is present in saliva? That's a favorite question of examiners. It is IgA. Remember that point, IgA. Immunoglobulin A is present in saliva. Okay, now coming on to antifungal. Antifungal property of saliva is given mainly by histatins. Okay, histatins. Remember that point, antifungal property is given by histatins. Now antibacterial property, it is mainly given by which all substances? Lysozymes, lactoferrins, calprotectin, lactoperoxidase, immunoglobulins and chromogranin A. Okay, so remember mainly lysozymes helps in antibacterial property. Now coming on to digestion, based upon which content food we are having. Okay, if it is a carbohydrate food, amylase helps in digestion. If it is a protein content food, protease. If it is a lipid content food, lipase. Then DNAs, RNAs, all these are the substances helping in digestion. And last one, the food which is the content which is helping for taste sensation, it is zinc. Okay, remember zinc, Zn2 plus. Zinc is the main content in saliva which is helping in taste sensation. So these points are very important MCQ viewpoint. Remember bicarbonates, remember immunoglobulin A, antifungal property by histatins, antibacterial property by lysozymes, digestion by amylase, protease, lipase and taste sensation by zinc. Okay, now when you take glands in our body as a whole, okay, there are two types of glands in our body. One is an exocrine gland type and another one is endocrine. So what is the difference between exocrine gland and an endocrine gland? Exocrine gland are the ones which secrete through a duct. Okay, so their secretion is through a definite pathway. Okay, they have a duct, whereas endocrine glands are the ones, their secretions are into the blood circulation. Okay, so endocrine glands are the ones which secrete into the blood circulation. So salivary glands are all exocrine glands because they have a definite pathway, they have a definite duct. Okay, so as you all know, there are three pairs of major salivary glands. Three pairs of major salivary. Pairs means what? It is present on both the sides, right and left. So there are three pairs of major salivary glands, as you all know: parotid gland, submandibular and sublingual. Now concentrate onto the picture. As you know, in that picture, what is given? A parotid gland. Can you see? Parotid gland, can you see? It is towards right side, and next to it I have written as 30%. So when you take the whole concentration of saliva, around 30% of the saliva in your oral cavity is contributed by the parotid glands. Okay, remember that point, around 30% only. Okay, so majority of the saliva comes from submandibular gland down. Okay, in that picture down you see submandibular gland. Okay, 60% I have written towards the side of it, onto the left side. So submandibular glands donates around 60% of the whole saliva, whereas sublingual gland donates only 5%. Okay, sublingual glands donates only 5%. It is present lingual, in the sublingual area, okay, towards the floor of the mouth. Now coming to the minor salivary glands. Minor salivary glands are present throughout. Other than this major salivary glands, we have minor salivary glands. They are present, there are many in number, and they are present throughout the mouth, in the palatal areas, in the gingival area. Also it is present in many areas. Okay, the total contribution of minor salivary glands are around 3 to 5%, maximum 7%. Okay, so the major contribution is from submandibular gland. Second contribution from the parotid gland 30%, and next from the sublingual gland. And minor salivary glands secretions are present mainly at night. Okay, so the activity of minor salivary glands is mainly in the night. Okay, daytime is mainly contributed by the major salivary glands, and during night it is mainly contributed by the minor salivary glands. Okay, so remember these important points. Now let's learn about the various ducts of these major salivary glands. Okay, and where does it open? The location is very important. Anatomy also, it is very important. So remember this. Now first we are learning about the submandibular gland, because around 60% contribution is from submandibular gland. So note down, submandibular gland, the duct is known as Wharton's duct. Okay, Wharton's duct. Okay, so that submandibular, that M, alphabet M, you just put it upside down, so remember as Wharton's duct. Okay, and they're present towards the side of lingual frenum. Where is their position? Where is their opening? Towards the side of lingual frenum. Okay, clear? And what is their concentration? Around 60%. Now around 30% is contributed by whom? By the parotid duct. Okay, parotid gland. So where does it open? Parotid duct opens on topmost. I have given Stenson's duct. Can you see? Stenson's duct opening towards the side of maxillary second molar. Okay, towards the buccal side of maxillary second molar, you have the opening of Stenson's duct. And last one, sublingual gland. Sublingual gland, the duct is known as Bartholin's duct, and they open next to that of the duct of submandibular duct itself. Okay, so Bartholin's duct is the duct of sublingual gland. So remember these names, very important. Now let's learn about minor salivary glands. So minor salivary glands are present throughout the oral cavity except in two areas. They are not present in the anterior hard palate area and gingiva. Okay, there are two locations where it is not present. Remember that point. Except anterior hard, they are not present in the anterior hard palate area and gingiva. Okay, now if you take the tongue, okay, the second picture, concentrate in the second picture, that pink marking, anterior part of the tongue. Can you see? Anterior part of the tongue, you have the gland is known as, minor salivary glands are known as glands of Blanton and Nuhan. Okay, whereas posteriorly, the green shade, okay, they are the posteriorly located minor salivary glands on the tongue. They are called as von Ebner's gland. Okay, now based upon which type of cell is present in these glands, based upon that we can divide them into serous and mucus. Okay, as you all know, there are serous cells and mucus cells. They are the saliva secreting cells in the salivary gland. So based upon which cell is predominantly present in them, we can divide them into serous and mucus. So in case of Blanton and Nuhan, anteriorly located Blanton and Nuhan, the cells are mainly mucus. Okay, mucus. Whereas the von Ebner's gland, which are located posteriorly, they are mainly serous. Clear? So anteriorly, the Blanton and Nuhan are mucus in nature, whereas von Ebner's glands are serous in nature. Okay, so most of the minor salivary glands except von Ebner's are mucus in nature. Okay, only von Ebner's glands are the ones which are serous in nature. Rest all the other minor salivary glands are mucus in nature. Okay, only von Ebner's is serous in nature. Clear? And von Ebner's is purely serous. Okay, there is no mixture in them, only they are serous in nature. Okay, as I told you, the function of salivary glands, minor salivary glands, is mainly in the night, especially at night. Clear? So I hope it's very clear about the minor salivary glands. Other minor salivary glands are located in the labial glands, palatine glands, pharyngeal glands. All these are minor salivary glands itself. Okay, so remember these important MCQs. So we learnt about the composition of saliva, what is present in saliva, what is their activity. Then we learnt about the major salivary glands, their location, the names of their ducts, where does it open. Then we learnt about the minor salivary glands, where they are located and what is their major cell present in them. Okay, this much we studied. Now let's move on to blood supply and nerve supply of these major salivary glands. That is very, very important. Okay, so when you talk about the blood supply, the parotid gland is mainly supplied by the transverse facial artery. Okay, in that label I have underlined the label transverse facial artery. Can you make out? Okay, onto the left side, transverse facial artery. The parotid gland is supplied mainly by transverse facial artery. Okay, and the same branch, okay, the submandibular gland is supplied by the facial artery. It's supplied by the facial artery, and sublingual gland also is supplied by the facial artery, the branches. Okay, clear? So the parotid gland is supplied by transverse facial artery. Remember that point. Now coming on to the nerve supply, the submandibular and sublingual are supplied by which nerve? By the chorda tympani nerve. Okay, and the saliva produced by them are mainly watery in nature. Submandibular, that yellow color is the nerve supply. The submandibular and sublingual are supplied by the chorda tympani nerve, and the saliva produced by them are mostly watery in nature. Whereas the nerve supply to parotid gland is mainly from glossopharyngeal nerve, and the saliva produced by them is especially very thick in nature. Okay, thick in nature. Whereas submandibular and sublingual saliva produced is slightly watery in nature. Clear? It is supplied by chorda tympani nerve, whereas parotid gland is supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Now this picture shows you clearly the nerve supply of the parotid gland. Can you see clearly the parotid gland, the yellow color? Okay, so the medulla oblongata of the brain is shown, and from there the blue color branch is coming. Okay, there is a glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, blue color label. Okay, so glossopharyngeal nerve, the ninth cranial nerve, is supplying the otic ganglion, and from the otic ganglion again it comes and it supplies the parotid gland. Okay, so parotid gland is supplied by which nerve? By the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, the ninth cranial nerve. Remember that. And the saliva produced by the parotid gland is thicker in nature compared to that of submandibular and sublingual gland production. Now let's learn in detail about the origin of the salivary glands. Okay, so now listen carefully. How does it happen? Okay, so I taught you about the development of the tooth. So in development of tooth chapter, I had taught you how does the ectoderm develop. It is basically from the ectoderm. Okay, so there is an ectoderm, and ectoderm, there is origin of epithelial plug cord. Okay, concentrate on the first picture, and then from that epithelial plug cord there is a bud formation. And from this bud formation you have the oral ectoderm derived organs. Which are they? The tooth and the salivary gland. Okay, whereas from the skin ectoderm derived organs are these two, hair follicles and mammary glands are skin derived, whereas oral ectoderm you have these two are very important for us. Okay, the tooth and the salivary gland. So both tooth and the salivary gland origin are almost similar. Both of them are oral ectoderm derived organs. Clear? Now how does it happen? So as I had explained in the development of 2 chapter, you remember very well, the epithelium grows downward into the connective tissue area. Okay, the epithelium is growing downward into the connective tissue origin. Okay, so now look into the second picture. The second picture clearly shows you there is epithelium growth, and in between the epithelium there is connective tissue. Okay, as the epithelium grows, in between connective tissue invades, and this divides the epithelium into different lobes. So the division of these epithelium into different lobes are given in that picture, and lobes are further within the lobes, it is again divided by the connective tissue into lobules, small lobules. Okay, so what is that separations? The separations are actually the connective tissue. The connective tissue is the one which is separating the epithelium into different lobes and lobules. So in between connective tissue is called as interlobular septa and interlobar septa. Okay, now within the lobes, what you can see the ducts. Okay, from the epithelium, the cells which are forming into parenchyma, serous cells and mucous cells, and from the serous and mucous cells, whatever saliva is produced is secreted into the various ducts. Okay, and surrounding the entire salivary gland there is a capsule. There is a capsule covering the entire salivary gland. Okay, so this is the characteristic feature of the characteristic appearance histology picture of the salivary gland. Okay, now in this picture, first picture, you can easily make out what I explained just now. Okay, the growth of bud is happening here in the bud of oral epithelium, growth into the underlying connective tissue. Okay, parenchyma means underlying connective tissue. So the growth of the epithelium is happening in the connective tissue. So you can make out there are small lobes are forming of small lobes within that connective tissue. Now these lobes are again in the second picture. Now coming to the second picture, in second picture can you make out small clefts? So those clefts are actually the divisions by the connective tissue forming the duct. Okay, so the growth of epithelium has small buds in different areas, and they are divided in between by the connective tissue. Okay, and there is ductal formation in between. Okay, understood? So this is how the entire development of the salivary gland happens. Now finally, what is the final result of this division? It finally results in this particular picture, the second picture. Okay, you have a main excretory duct. If you go inside, what you can make out, there is an excretory duct, there is a striated duct. Okay, there is an intercalated duct, and inside you can make out the tubular pieces. Okay, they where the secretion and the production of saliva happens. Okay, tubular secretory end piece and spherical secretory end piece. Okay, that secretory end piece, if you take a cut section and if you see under microscope, you can make out the cells of salivary gland. Okay, and the cells of salivary glands are mucus acini and the serous acini, and you can also make out the ductal cells. Okay, so the saliva is produced by the serous acinus and the mucus acinus, and whatever saliva produced by them are secreted into the ductal area. Okay, or to the ductal passage. Okay, and the ducts are again divided into different types. Okay, based upon their passage into intercalated duct, striated duct, excretory duct, and finally the main excretory duct. Clear? I hope it's clear now. Now we are concentrating on the serous cell and the mucus cell. Okay, because they can show you in exam MCQ viewpoint, they can show you the image of a serous cell and a mucus cell, and they can even ask you to identify. Okay, it was asked in previous exams. So serous cell, this is the characteristic histological picture. Okay, electron microscopic view. The serous cell is somewhat circular or round in shape. Okay, it is circular or round in shape, whereas mucus cells are pyramidal in shape. Okay, so that is the main difference. So these serous acini, they are circular or round in shape, and they are smaller in size compared to the mucus, and they are composed of less number of cells, and the cells are inside the serous acini, the cells are pyramidal in shape again. Okay, so the serous acini is circular in shape and the cell within them are pyramidal in shape. Understood? Now then, if you take each particular cell, you can make out some pink color granules in the apical area. They are called as secretory granules. In that picture, can you make out apical area? Can you make out pink granules? And they are called as secretory granules. So these secretory granules are present only in serous cell, not in the mucus cells. Clear? And the nucleus of serous cell is also very important. It is spherical. round and placed at the basal one-third of the cell, whereas in case of a mucous cell they are flattened. Okay, they are not round, they are flattened. Okay, so that is a major difference. Now this is a picture of a mucous cell. As I told you, mucous cell is also pyramidal in shape only, but they are more. If you take a single mucous acini, in that particular acini there are more cells, mucous cells, and each of the cell, if you take, they are pyramidal in shape and the nucleus is flattened and pressed against the basal part. Okay, basal plasma membrane. But in case of a serous cell it was circular in shape. Okay, whereas here they are flattened. Whereas, can you make out the secretory granules here? Here the secretory granules are not pink in color, they are empty, isn't it? Secretory droplets. Okay, so that is the major difference between a serous cell and a mucous cell. You should be able to identify with the picture. Okay, serous cell, how does it look like? They are having secretory granules, whereas in case of a mucous cell you don't find any secretory granules here. Okay, it is looking empty in the apical area. If you take a H&E section, it looks empty. Okay. Now coming on to the third type of cell present in that of the salivary glands, that is the mixed acini. What is a mixed acini? Now look at the picture. In that picture, can you make out a white clear cell? They are the mucous cells. Okay, and that is the with the red arrow mark. Okay, they are the mucous cells. Whereas on top of it, the blue arrow mark, can you make out serous cell? They are with the secretory granules. That is why they look pink in color in the H&E section, whereas mucous cells appear what? Clear in H&E sections. So on top of it, like a cap shape, the serous cells lie. Okay, so this, when there is an appearance of both of them together, it is called as a mixed acini, or they are called as serous demilunes. They are also known as serous demilunes. These are composed of mucous cell capped on top with a serous cell. Okay, they are called as serous demilunes. So what are serous demilunes? Serous demilunes are a mixture of both serous and mucous cell. There will be a serous cell which is a clear cell. On top of it, like a cap, you can see a serous cell on top of it. Okay, so that is serous demilunes. Okay, and the secretions of the serous cells which reaches the lumen through the intercellular canaliculi present between the mucous cell. Okay, clear? I hope it's clear. Serous demilunes. Now as I told you, there are two types of cells. Okay, in the salivary glands mainly. One is serous, one is mucous, and based upon which cell is predominantly seen in the salivary gland, based upon that we can classify the salivary glands into different types. Okay, so parotid gland is purely serous in nature. Okay, the cells are mainly serous. Only serous cells are present in the parotid gland, whereas submandibular gland and sublingual glands are mixed glands. You can find both the serous cells and mucous cells in submandibular and sublingual. Okay, so parotid gland is purely serous in nature, whereas submandibular and sublingual are what? They are mixed in nature. So if you take sections of submandibular and sublingual, you can see both the serous cells and mucous cells. That is what is mean. Okay, and though they are mixed in nature, the submandibular glands are predominantly serous. Okay, they contain both, but a slightly more in number will be serous. Okay, whereas sublingual gland is predominantly mucous. They contain both, but they contain predominantly mucous cells. Okay, that is why they are predominantly mucous. Okay, clear? Parotid gland is purely serous. There is no mucous cells in them. Submandibular contain both serous and mucous cells, but predominantly serous cells. Sublingual glands contain both serous and mucous, but predominantly mucous cells. I hope it's clear now. Now if you take minor salivary glands, in that glossopalatine and palatine glands are purely mucous in nature. Okay, remember that point. I hope von Ebner's also, I hope it's you people remember von Ebner's. Okay, von Ebner's seen in the posterior part of the tongue is purely serous in nature. I hope that point is very was useful. I had given in the minor salivary glands explanation in the beginning. Okay, understood? So that is how the classification of various salivary glands based upon the type of cell present in them. So in this particular chapter, what all we learned till now? We learned about the saliva, the composition of saliva, and what is the position of the salivary glands, how much percentage is contribution of the salivary glands to the saliva, what are the ducts, okay, the names of the ducts, where is their location, then what is the artery supply, what is the nerve supply of the salivary glands. Okay, then we learned about the development of the salivary glands. They are from the epithelium. from the ectoderm. Just like the oral ectoderm develops into a tooth, same way we have the development of the salivary glands. You have the development of the epithelium, and in between the connective tissue invades, and there is segments, lobes and lobule formation, okay, and there is ducts, okay. And then we learned about the saliva producing cells, serous cells and mucous cells, and based upon the predominancy we can divide the serous and mucous cells. Based upon them we can divide the salivary glands whether they're purely serous or mucous or they are mixed, okay. Now we are learning about myoepithelial cells. What are myoepithelial cells? Myoepithelial cells are the cells which help the saliva secretion to come into the duct, just like the cells which help in contraction, okay. So myoepithelial cells are the contracting cells. They contract and they help the saliva produced by the serous and mucous cells to reach the duct. So how does these myoepithelial cells help in contraction? It is because they contain the contracting filaments. They contain two important processes within them. They are called as actin and myosin, just like the smooth muscles, okay. The smooth muscles of our body have actin and myosin. I hope everybody knows about it. So they help in contraction, okay. Same way, myoepithelial cells also contain filaments, actin and myosin. So with the help of these filaments, they contract and they help in pushing the saliva which is produced in serous and mucous cells into the duct, okay. Clear? So how do they lie? They lie like a basket, okay. They lie like a basket, and within the myoepithelial cells you have the, next to the serous cells and mucous cells, just like a basket you have the myoepithelial cells, okay. So it is as if the serous cells and mucous cells are lying within this basket. Understood? So when the myoepithelial cells contract with the help of actin and myosin, what happens? The saliva produced in the serous and mucous cells will get ejected into the duct. Understood? Okay, it is by exocytosis. Understood? Exocytosis, just like one push, okay. They give one push to that of the, they contract and they give a push to that of the serous and mucous cells, and the saliva produced in them gets ejected into the duct. I hope it's very clear now. Okay, now myoepithelial cells, because of that particular property, they are also called as basket cells, okay. Because of their characteristic location, they are also called as basket cells. They help in expelling the primary saliva from the NPs, that is the serous and mucous cells, into the ductal system, and they contain filaments of actin and myosin similar to that of a smooth muscle cell. Understood? Now another important point we should remember is myoepithelial cells are the cells which contribute to the salivary gland disease pleomorphic adenoma. We'll be learning in detail in part 2 about the salivary gland tumors, okay. In that I'll be telling you myoepithelial cells are the cells which help in formation of pleomorphic adenoma. They are the causative cells, okay. They are the cells of origin for pleomorphic adenoma, okay, the salivary gland tumor. So remember that point here also. Myoepithelial cells are the ones which help in give rise to pleomorphic adenoma, the tumor, okay. So remember just that point right now. When we talk about pleomorphic adenoma, I'll be explaining in detail, okay. So this is about myoepithelial cells, or otherwise called as basket cell. Just note down their characteristic image. How do they appear? In the second picture I have given, they lie like a basket. Can you make out? Okay, the secretory cells are present within them, and myoepithelial cells are lying like a basket, okay. Now coming on to the ductal area. So whatever saliva, so we learned about who is producing saliva, okay. Serous cells and mucous cells are producing saliva. There is a mixed SNI also, which is called as what? Serous demilunes, okay. And there is a basket which is lying next to it, that is the myoepithelial cells. They are the basket cells. With their help, the saliva is getting pushed into the duct. So the first duct the saliva reaches is the intercalated duct. From the serous and mucus, it first reaches where? The intercalated duct. So intercalated duct is what is shown in that picture, and they are lined by small cuboidal cells. The duct is lined by small cuboidal cells, and they are prominently seen in parotid gland. You should remember that point. Intercalated ducts are prominently seen in which gland? They are mostly seen in the parotid gland, okay. Just remember that point. Now from the intercalated duct, the saliva gets ejected into which area? To the striated ductal area, okay. From the intercalated duct, the saliva is reaching which part? Striated duct. So they are bigger in size compared to Intercalated duct. Intercalated duct, it was cuboidal cells. Now when you come to striated duct, the cells are columnar in shape. Now in this particular area, it is the ductal portion of the salivary gland which is modifying the saliva. Okay, initially when the saliva is ejected from the serous and mucous cells, they does not contain substances, mineral substances like sodium or potassium, nothing. They don't contain sodium, chlorine or potassium, nothing. They doesn't have anything. It is the ductal system which is modifying all these things. Okay, so they modify the saliva. It makes the saliva a hypotonic solution, and the saliva within the striated duct will now contain a very low amount of sodium and chloride and very high amount of potassium within it. Okay, so the saliva is modified within the duct, and it is modified with low sodium and chloride and high level of potassium. Now the saliva from the striated duct, it finally reaches the excretory duct. As it reaches the excretory duct, in the picture you can make out, okay, that ED, the marking ED is excretory duct, and that arrow marks is pointing towards the striated duct. Okay, now the excretory duct, finally as it reaches the excretory duct, the saliva is further modified by adding mucoid substances into it, and the saliva, the watery saliva, becomes somewhat thicker. Okay, initially the saliva was very watery in nature as it gets ejected from mucous and serous cells. Then as it goes on through the ductal system, intercalated duct to the striated duct and then to the excretory duct, okay, it gets modified with the low sodium and chlorine level, high amount of potassium, and then further on mucoid substances also added to it. Okay, so that is how finally the saliva gets ejected. Now finally, when we deal about the histology part of salivary glands, we should also take into consideration the current aspect of question papers. Okay, in current aspect, they are more pointing towards the clinical considerations. In MCQs, they give more importance towards the clinical aspect. Okay, so we should also learn about the clinical considerations. So as the saliva is produced in our body, okay, there is the salivary gland also undergoes age changes. Okay, a 20-year-old male and a 70-year-old male, there is a change in the saliva composition. Okay, because the salivary gland cells are getting replaced by the adipose tissue. Because of this replacement, what happens? Because of this replacement, the saliva production will be less in the older men, okay, or female, okay, based upon the age. When the person was young, the saliva production was to the highest, whereas as as you mature, okay, as you become older, what happens? The salivary cells, mucous cells and serous cells are replaced by the adipose tissue, and finally when the older individuals come to your clinic, they tell you, I have a very dry mouth. Why? Because of this change. Okay, so salivary cells are replaced by which type of cells? That is an important MCQ. It is replaced by adipose tissue in a older age individuals, and because of that reason, most of the older individuals come to your clinic and complain about xerostomia. Okay, dry mouth or xerostomia. Clear? Then what are the other degenerative changes? Okay, the degenerative and metaplastic changes can lead to reduced salivary secretion, as I told you. Then what are the diseases? Okay, this diseases that can be both local as well as systemic. Okay, it can be affected by cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, herpes virus 6 and 7 infect and replicate within the salivary gland. Okay, and they shed into the saliva. Okay, these viruses are also become a part of salivary gland system, and they replicate within them and they get secreted into the saliva. Okay, which are the viruses? Cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, herpes virus 6 and 7. Okay, clear? And have you heard about mumps? Okay, in case of the patient will come to you in the clinic and complaining about inflammation and pain in the parotid area. Okay, so that is mumps. Mumps can be a causative factor for it. Okay, and how does it appear? As inflammation and pain in the parotid region, okay, or the submandibular region. Then what is cyanulith? Cyanulith is actually the blockage because of calcifications. There will be blockage in the ductal pathway of the salivary glands. Okay, and it is mostly seen in which duct is the most of the times it is asked, it is mostly seen in submandibular duct. Okay, because of the tortuous nature of the duct. Okay, because of the tortuous nature of the duct, the submandibular gland has got highest predilection for cyanulith formation. Then next, another clinical consideration you should remember is diabetes mellitus. In sugar patients also, so diabetes mellitus affected individuals also, the salivary gland will be swelled. Okay, there will be swelling and the salivary flow will be reduced in that particular case also. Okay, you should remember all these points. Okay, clear? Now let me complete this particular portion with some miscellaneous topics. Okay, that is, have you heard about mucins? Mucins are actually high molecular weight glycoproteins. Okay, they're present within the saliva. So one or two times they have asked in MCQ which is the type of mucin present within the saliva, and what is the method of identifying this mucin in the saliva. Okay, laboratory procedure. Two times they have asked in multiple choice questions. So just have an idea about mucins. Mucins are actually high molecular weight glycoproteins present within the saliva. They are actually simple carbohydrates. Okay, and there are mainly two types of mucins are present. One is neutral mucin and one is acidic mucin. Okay, there are two types of mucins present in saliva. One is neutral mucin and one is acidic mucin. Acidic mucins are sialomucin and sulfomucin. Okay, sialomucin and sulfomucin. Now there are various methods to identify these mucin. Both neutral mucin and acidic mucin are identified by different techniques. One is Muzik-Karman. Okay, Muzik-Karman is the oldest technique for detection of mucin within the saliva, and Muzik-Karman method is only useful for evaluating the acidic mucin, that is sulfamucin and sialomucin. Okay, Muzik-Karman is only still a valuable technique for evaluation of only acidic mucin. It is not used for neutral mucin. Second method is alkane blue. Alkane blue, just like Muzik-Karman only, alkane blue does not stain neutral mucin. It is also used for acidic mucins only. Now coming on to colloidal iron. Colloidal iron is also used for acidic mucin, just like Muzik-Karman and alkane blue. Colloidal iron is also used for what? For identification of the acidic mucin, sulfamucin and sialomucin. But this technique, that is PAS, periodic acid shift technique, PAS, is used especially to recognize neutral mucin. Okay, that is an exceptional case. Okay, periodic acid shift technique is used for recognizing neutral mucin. That you should remember. And the last technique, you can use a combination of alkane blue and PAS technique. Okay, the combination of alkane blue and PAS can be used as a means of distinguishing neutral mucin from acidic mucin, because as I told you just now, alkane blue can be used to identify the acidic mucin and PAS can be used to identify the neutral mucin. So if you use both the techniques together, you can differentiate between neutral and acidic. Okay, so these are the different techniques of identifying mucins. So this is just a random information because we dealt about saliva today. Because of that, I have included mucin also as a miscellaneous portion here. Okay, so what are mucins? They are high molecular weight proteins, and there are two different types of mucin. You remember, neutral and acidic mucin. Acidic mucins are sialomucins and sulfamucin, and the different techniques in that you should remember. Just remember, PAS is used for identifying neutral mucins. Rest all other techniques, if it is given in the options, just rule out it is used for acidic mucins. Okay, so remember that way. So with this we come to the end of oral histology salivary glands chapter. Okay, so if you have any doubts, you can directly message. Okay, we'll reply soon. Okay, if you have any doubts, you can ask us directly through messages. Okay, keep learning, and in the next part 2 of salivary glands, we'll be dealing in detail about the diseases of salivary glands. Okay, thank you.